What's going on, everybody? Jack here, another episode of Big and Bold. And today I'm giving you my 10 top predictions for this upcoming season. Some of these you may have already kind of been aware of, or you may have thought of these yourself, heard them elsewhere. But these are my 10 favorite, and ideally, at the end of the season, I'm going to be able to look back, see how many of these I got right. In all likelihood, most of them are probably going to be wrong. I think they're all pretty grounded in reality. It's entirely possible that these happen. I think they're unlikely, but entirely possible. So I'm going to run through them 1 through 10. And at number 1, I have Bryce Young becoming only the second two-time Heisman winner since running back Archie Griffin did it for Ohio State. And any Ohio State fans that are listening that actually care, I don't think he should have won it that second time in 1975. But who cares? Bryce Young, Heisman winner from last season, over 4,800 yards, 47 touchdowns, and 7 interceptions. The guy put up freaking video game numbers for Alabama last year. A couple things going against him is, again, we've only seen it happen once where you've had a two-time Heisman winner. And anytime a sophomore or a returning junior going into a senior season comes off of a Heisman, there's talk about them potentially repeating. Now, he has some things going against him. John Mechie and Jameson Williams are both gone at wide receiver, and we saw the impact that had in the national championship game when he had to play without those players. However, you're talking about an end of season in-game adjustment. That's a lot different than preparing and heading into the year and progressing with those new wide receivers coming in that he'll be playing with. So I do have Bryce Young winning the Heisman again. CJ Stroud is currently the favorite Ohio State quarterback to win the Heisman, and there is certainly reason to believe that he could do that. He's lost a couple of first-round wide receivers himself, a couple of fantastic talents. However, Alabama's got a great wide receiver room. Ohio State has a great wide receiver room. I have really no concerns about Alabama replacing the talent at receiver for Bryce Young. It's a stacked team, and I think he'll be a two-time Heisman winner. My second bold prediction for the upcoming season, and I don't mean to pick on Notre Dame, but I believe they will lose 3 games or more for the first time since 2016 in Marcus Freeman's first season as head coach. And the thing with Notre Dame, it's not so much the accumulative talent on the team. I do think that they're lacking some offensive firepower, and there's some question marks on that side of the ball. I don't doubt the defense is going to be very good, if not great. But you look at their schedule, you talk about going to Ohio State in the first game of the season and to USC at the end of the season. And this isn't last year's USC team. You've now got Caleb Williams at quarterback at USC. You've now got Lincoln Riley, a head coach at USC. Offensively, they're stacked. That's going to be a great matchup, offense versus defense. Offensive head coach in Lincoln Riley against a defensive head coach in Marcus Freeman. But those are 2 incredibly challenging games. And then between that, you got to play Clemson at home, who didn't have the best year last year. They're still a double-digit win team and one of the top teams in the country in terms of talent. You got to play BYU on a neutral field. BYU last year, even without Zach Wilson at quarterback, won 10 games. You're going on the road to play North Carolina, who Mac Brown has a very talented program there that, could put it together this season. We've seen Stanford win double-digit games. They're coming off of a rough year, but we know they have the potential to do it. So, in my mind, USC, Clemson, and Ohio State, it's hard to win even one of those games. And then you talk about Stanford and BYU and North Carolina, and you're asking them to win, at least 2 of those. And it's not like teams like Boston College or Cal are going to roll over and let Notre Dame win. So it's a very difficult schedule for a first-year head coach who spent a year as a defensive coordinator at Cincinnati, spent a year as the defensive coordinator at Notre Dame. Now he's a head coach. I just think it's a tall order to ask him to go better than 9-3. I think they could go 9-3 with this schedule and with this team. And that would be perfectly fine for Marcus Freeman. But I think putting them into these top 10 polls heading into the season, I think is a little bit too much to ask for Notre Dame. So that's my second bold prediction. My third bold prediction for the upcoming season is that Texas will win the Big 12 for the first time since 2009. And that is a lot to ask of a team that won 5 games last year. But Steve Sarkisian is now in year 2. They now have the former number 1 player and quarterback in the country, Quinn Ewers, at quarterback, transferred over from Ohio State. Xavier Worthy had one of the top freshman seasons for all wide receivers last year, and they've got one of the top running backs in the country in Bijan Robinson. They are recruiting incredibly well. They've used the transfer portal very well. This feels like one of those teams that had a culture problem last year, and with Steve Sarkisian at head coach now in year 2, I think it's a lot more likely that they succeed. Oklahoma's got a new head coach and lost a ton of talent to the transfer portal. Baylor has to reload after losing a lot of talent from last year's squad that won the Big 12. Oklahoma State lost some of their biggest contributors from last year as well. So it's entirely possible that Texas could become a Big 12 contender. And yes, it seems kind of like every year people talk about Texas coming back and having a big season, but I really do think that it's possible for them this year. My fourth bold prediction for the upcoming season: NC State will win 10 games for the first time since 2002 and only the second time in school history. Now, NC State went 9-3 last year, upsetting Clemson in Clemson's own backyard, as a matter of fact. They beat the 9th-ranked Clemson team 27-21, going on the road to do so. But, we also saw them lose to Mississippi State, lose 30-31 to Miami, 42-45 to Wake Forest. So they lost a couple really close games. So you would expect that next year they're probably on the winning side of a couple more really close games. However, they also have to go on the road to play Clemson next season. I still think their schedule is pretty favorable. Their 2 most difficult road games are Clemson, North Carolina, Boston College, Wake Forest, Virginia Tech, Florida State, all at home. I think it's entirely possible they win 10 games. Again, we've only seen them do it once. However, they have Devin Leary at quarterback, 35 touchdowns last year. They return the bulk of their offensive line, the bulk of their defense. NC State could really surprise some people this year. And even with a loss to Clemson, I'm not sure where else another loss will come from on their schedule. So I'm really bullish on NC State this year. Last year, everyone was bullish on North Carolina. That didn't work out. So now we're going to go over to the other team. We're going to go to NC State this time around. So I'm very big on NC State having a 10-win season and being kind of a borderline top 10 team. Next up, this is seemingly a prediction that you tend to hear every other year, but Kirk Ferentz, Iowa head coach since 1999, will retire from Iowa and be replaced by current offensive coordinator and Kirk Ferentz's son, Brian Ferentz. Now, Kirk Ferentz has done a great job at Iowa. Iowa has finished in the top 10 5 times since he got to Iowa. And that's not easy to do for a program like that. 11-2 in 2009, 12-2 in 2015. But since that top 10 Iowa squad in 2015 that went 12-2 and made it to a Rose Bowl, they haven't quite reached the same heights. Who's to say if, now that he's approaching 70 years old, if Kirk Ferentz will actually finally retire from Iowa. But it seems like he's certainly been grooming his son for a head coaching position. I think that this is finally the year Kirk Ferentz retires and hangs it up and gives it to his son, who's had that offensive coordinator role. He'll have been in that role for a couple of years at that point and believes he'll be ready to take over for the program. My next bold prediction: former 5-star quarterback Cade Klubnik will replace current starter and other, former 5-star quarterback DJ Uiagalelei before Clemson's Week 9 bye week. That gives DJ Uiagalelei, and I hope I'm saying that correctly. I can hear it as many times as I want, and I'll still pronounce it incorrectly. He'll have a lot of opportunities to prove that he should be the starter. Clemson's going to be figuring their life out in the first 3 weeks of the season with pretty soft opponents. Then they go to Wake Forest. They got a home game against NC State, which is a big revenge game for them. They got to go to Boston College and Florida State, the top and bottom of the East Coast. So that 4-game stretch there against Wake Forest, NC State, Boston College, and Florida State, that's when we're going to know if DJ is going to be able to hold that starting job, or if they're going to put in the young upside kid of Cade Klubnik. That's when I believe it's going to happen. I think it's going to be, losing to Wake Forest, struggling against NC State, maybe struggling against Boston College, getting upset against Florida State, and that will uproot DJ. Now, Clemson has an incredibly talented team, but they had an incredibly talented team last year, and they still lost to Georgia. They still lost in OT against NC State. They still went on the road and lost to Pitt. Now, they ended the year 10-3. Now, for Clemson, that's really not good enough for them. The Cheez-It Bowl is not good enough for Clemson. But it's not just that they lost. Losing to Georgia 10-3 is one thing, but it's beating Georgia Tech 14-8 at home. It's beating Boston College 19-13 at home. It's beating Syracuse on the road 17-14. It's going on the road to Louisville and beating them 30-24. Like, those one-score games meant almost as much as these, losses did A lot of it got thrown onto the lap of DJ last year. Now you bring in new coaches and coordinators. We'll see how Clemson does this year, but I have a feeling Cade Klubnik's going to take that starting quarterback position before that bye week this season, before they go on the road to play Notre Dame, and then have a very important couple of games against Louisville and Miami. My next bold prediction, very similar to my last one. Former 5-star quarterback J.J. McCarthy will replace Big Ten winning quarterback Cade McNamara before Michigan's Week 8 bye. Now, this could happen a lot sooner as well. You look at Michigan's schedule, their first 4 games of the season are all pretty soft. Their 3 non-conference games, Colorado State, Hawaii, UConn, they're going to beat those 3 teams by a combined 100 points probably. Then you have Maryland at home, who could have a potent offense, but it's Michigan's homecoming game. Michigan doesn't lose to Maryland. Those 4 games are when they're going to probably determine who their starting quarterback really is, not in training camp. The first, the official starter against Colorado State to start the year will probably be Cade McNamara, and he deserves that. He's a senior. He was the guy for them last year when they won a Big Ten title, albeit a lot of that was placed on the defense and the run game. But he didn't make many mistakes. He also didn't make many big throws, but he was the guy for them last year. He's a great leader. J.J. McCarthy, the former 5-star, was put on the field a lot last season and flashed that 5-star talent that he has. He didn't make a lot of mistakes, I think, as some people believe he did. He didn't make as many mistakes as some people believe he did. J.J. McCarthy last year looked like a freshman quarterback who was placed on the field seemingly at random and tasked with getting it done. Sometimes he did, sometimes he didn't. But those first 4 games of the season, they're going to roll both quarterbacks out in all likelihood. And we're going to see just how good they are. Now, in my opinion, that's when you put Cade on the field, you put JJ on the field against outmatched opponents, and you say, who plays better? That's going to be your starter against Iowa on the road, which is probably not the best idea in hindsight, because going on the road to Kinnick Stadium, Michigan struggled against Iowa the last 10 or 12 years or so, but they're going to make that decision. And at the very latest, I think going on the road to play Iowa is when we're going to know who the starting quarterback is. Because if Cade McNamara struggles, it'll be JJ. And if they go into that game, and that's kind of my concern with their quarterback situation, is the potential flip-flopping. I have a feeling that come that road contest against Iowa, they're going to have their foot planted on who the starter is. They're going to roll them out on the road against Indiana the next week, at home against Penn State the next, after the bye week against Michigan State at home. And that's going to roll them through to the rest of the year until going on the road to play Ohio State. And you're going to want your starting quarterback for that road contest against Ohio State to have been on the road against Iowa and Indiana and Rutgers, because if it's J.J. McCarthy, but they don't make that determination that he's the guy for them until he plays Penn State at home, and then he's got the bye week, and then Michigan State at home, and his only road contest between Penn State and the Ohio State game is going on the road to play Rutgers. That doesn't really bode well to go on the road to play in the shoe at the end of the year. So they have to make that determination, I think, before their bye week. And I do believe they will. And I think J.J. McCarthy will be the starting quarterback. Next prediction. Maryland will finish with a top 20 offense in Taulia Tagovailoa's 4th and final season with the program. They finished 35th in total offense in 2021. But Tagovailoa is coming back for his senior season. He's got returning wide receivers in Dante Demas and Raheem Jarrett. They were a sneaky 7-win team last year. It wasn't a great season by any means. They went 6-6 in the regular season. I think that their offense is really going to pop this season, and they may not win a lot of games, but I think that they'll be competitive in a lot of games. And it's going to be a little bit more exciting to watch Maryland football. My 9th big prediction for the year, Jahmyr Gibbs, transfer from Georgia Tech, Alabama starting running back, will become a Heisman hopeful in his first year with the Crimson Tide. In a season very similar to that of Najee Harris in 2020. Now, you remember in 2020, Alabama had 3 of the top 5 Heisman finalists. You had Mac Jones, Devontae Smith, who won the Heisman, and Najee Harris. Big thing to know when you're looking at Jahmyr Gibbs, he was incredibly efficient at Georgia Tech, despite being on a not-so-talented team. 143 carries, 746 yards, averaged 5.2 yards per carry, and 4 rushing touchdowns. Even more so, he had 465 receiving yards and 2 receiving touchdowns. Great receiving back at Georgia Tech. Probably could have been used more than he was. And he had a couple rough games last year. Don't get me wrong. He didn't look very good against Pitt. Didn't look very good against Duke. I get that. But it's Georgia Tech. He's on probably the most talented roster in college football now. with an incredible offensive line, and Bryce Young, who is going to be looking to throw the ball elsewhere from his top 2 wide receivers last year. I think Jahmyr Gibbs is going to fill that role as a phenomenal receiving back for Alabama. Great, speedy, explosive runner. And I think he's going to finish as a Heisman hopeful and going to surprise some people. And then finally, another running back prediction for this upcoming year. Braylon Allen, Wisconsin starting running back, will lead the Big Ten in rushing yards, which would be the 15th time since 1993 that a Wisconsin running back will lead the Big Ten in rushing yards. And I chose 1993 because that's when we started to see Wisconsin take over as that dominant rushing threat in the Big Ten. And they have just continued to do that year after year. And it looks like Braylon Allen would continue that. What's kind of incredible is that he didn't hit double-digit touches until October 9th last season against Illinois. And then he couldn't be stopped as an 18-year-old running back that played a lot of linebacker in high school. 228 yards and 3 touchdowns against Nebraska. 140 yards and 2 touchdowns against Purdue. 100 yards against Iowa. 173 and 3 against Northwestern. The kid was incredible last year. He is now only a sophomore. He's going to lead the Big Ten in rushing yards this year. I firmly believe that. Just like many Wisconsin running backs have done before him. But thank you for listening, everybody. Those are my top 10 predictions. Keep an eye out for when, after this regular season, we go back and look at how many of these predictions I got right. Again, thank you for listening, everybody. Please like and subscribe, and have a good one.